Will the House please come to order? In view of the fact that amendments number 6 and number 7 to Committee Substitute for House Bill 81 are not being offered at this time, I am going to roll them to the bottom of the calendar. Madam Clerk.
Amendment number 9 by Representatives Laban, Kaufman, and Thompson, beginning page 108, following line 11.
Representative Laban.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move amendment number 9.
There's been an objection. Representative Laban.
Madam Speaker, amendment number 9 would ensure that for fiscal year 2023 expenditures from the Higher Education Investment Fund, estimated to total $21.8 million, would be paid from the general fund in the event that either the legislature is unable to enact the reverse sweep or legislation is not enacted into law protecting the Higher Education Investment Fund from the sweep. Madam Speaker, the Higher Education Investment Fund is responsible for paying the Alaska Performance Scholarships and the needs-based Alaska Education Grant Scholarships, as well as the WWAMI program. Issues involving the Higher Education Fund create unnecessary uncertainty for Alaska's brightest secondary students seeking an education at Alaska's university. While it is my preference that these scholarship programs be paid in a sustainable manner through the Higher Education Investment Fund, this contingency language ensures that the Alaska students will not face the uncertainty of whether they can afford college if the legislature is unable to come to a resolution on the status of the Higher Education Investment Fund. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move amendment number 9.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Representative McCabe.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Once again, this skirts the line of we're sort of dedicating money regardless of whether or not it's funded or swept or unswept or reverse swept. So we're putting contingency language in here now to actually dedicate a fund for a small group of Alaskans so that they won't have to worry about their finances going forward. In light of all the discussion this morning, in fact, I read a thing from Bloomberg at lunchtime. They said everybody in the United States should put aside $5,200 for inflation, for more money, for living expenses. So I'm unclear why we are dedicating essentially money to a very small group of people so that they don't have to worry when we have 750,000 Alaskans, the biggest special interest fund, that are in fact very worried. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion on amendment number 9. Representative Josephson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think I get to the same place as the previous speaker, that is opposition, but for a different reason. On June 28th or thereabouts of last year, the Attorney General, Mr. Taylor, issued a memo, and essentially what he concluded was that when the governor signs a bill in advance of the new fiscal year, funds appropriated for any number of items in the budget, scores of them, are valid. The residual can be swept. That was the essence of his memo. That is now in the vernacular called the scoop. So we have the sweep and now we have the scoop. Mr. Taylor is highly unlikely to change course and say, Mr. Taylor, was wrong. And so I think that this is unnecessary because I believe that our budget will fund this. And if for some reason we do not pass the legislation, I've sponsored one bill, the other body's Finance Committee has sponsored a bill, then these monies will be available pursuant to the Taylor AG memo. Also, my concern with funding in this way is that it sets a precedent that we will not capitalize any number of accounts in a designated way, And so it doesn't really offer the assurance to the beneficiaries, the scholarship recipients, that they seek. It is in that respect a form of a Band-Aid, with great respect. And so for that reason, I oppose the amendment.
Is there further discussion? Seeing none, in wrap-up, Representative Laban.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And in response to the comments, I sincerely hope that this amendment, as a safeguard, is unnecessary. I hope we find a way to protect the Higher Education Investment Fund by either enacting the reverse sweep or the pieces of legislation being considered to protect the fund from the sweep. However, we should not make scholarship students pawns to these political debates, and I would hope that we could offer this modest protection for the Higher Education Investment Fund and the scholarships that they protect. And I appreciate your support on Amendment number 9.
Are you ready for the question? Question is, shall Amendment number 9 to Committee Substitute for House Bill 281 pass the House? Members may proceed to vote. Will the clerk please lock the roll? Does any member wish to change his or her vote? Will the clerk please announce the vote?
17 yeas, 22 nays.
With 17 yeas and 22 nays, Amendment number 9 has failed to pass the House. Madam Clerk.
Amendment number 10 by Representatives Laban and Thompson, beginning page 41, following line 13.
Representative Laban.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move Amendment number 10. Madam
Representative
Speaker, Amendment 10 appropriates a 5% cost of living adjustment, or COLA, for exempt employees in the legislative and executive branches, contingent on the passage of a bill authorizing the salary adjustment. Madam Speaker, non-exempt employees, either in the general governmental unit or the supervisory unit, have received increases for cost of living totaling 5% since 2016. However, exempt employees have not received the same increases or salary adjustments during the same time period. Madam Speaker, it is a matter of fairness that exempt employees receive the same cost of living salary adjustments and increases as those in the general government and supervisory bargaining units. If enacted, legislation passed, the total will be $13.2 million, of which $7.5 million is UGF. $12.7 million of those salary adjustments would be authorized in the amendment before you in the operating budget, and the remaining portion of the executive branch salary adjustments would be part of the mental health budget. I'd appreciate the body's support on Amendment number 10.
Is there further discussion on Amendment number 10? Representative Prox.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in opposition to this amendment. I appreciate the concern raised that some state employees have received raises, others have not. There's another group of people out there that were expecting a dividend, and by golly, they have not received not only a cost of living adjustment, they have had about half of their dividend taken away since 2016. So yeah, I don't know that was fair, but to be unfair to everyone, fairly, equally unfair, there we go. I am opposed to this amendment at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative McCabe.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Same comments as the last one. I don't know how we can even think about this. We don't have a fiscal policy in place. We don't have a spending cap in place. We're just kind of out here in the weeds, and we're going to give a small, tiny group of people a raise when we have taken money from 750,000 Alaskans since 2016. Taken money, taxed them. And how can we even possibly consider this? I'm flabbergasted.
Representative Josephson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As with the previous amendment, I end up in the same place as the two previous speakers, but for a different reason. The couple things I wanted to highlight about this amendment are the following. First of all, the amendment pulls from 52 different fund sources, and I suspect this is done in part to not create new expenditures. But for example, one would have to ask, why would one of the funding sources be the Exxon Valdez Oil Spill Trust Civil Fund? What do we mean when we say $2.5 million, $2.2 million would come from interagency receipts? This even takes $259,000 from the Alaska Industrial Development and Export Authority. The amendment does suggest, as we learned in finance last week, that you need to have a law to accompany this appropriation. The only bill in this building that would cover that is from the member from the other body and from the downtown, or rather from the CBJ, City and Borough of Juneau. And that bill is in its first committee of referral. If that bill were to pass, or if one of our own chairs were to draft such a bill, it would have a fiscal note, and that fiscal note would be funded through the operating budget. So in that respect, the amendment, if you feel some sympathy for this amendment, I understand that, but the amendment itself attests to the fact that you must have a bill. And if that bill passes, it will be funded. And for that reason, it's unnecessary to have this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I stand in support of this amendment, amendment number 10. You know, it's really just a matter of fairness that exempt employees receive the same COLA increases as those in the general government unit and the supervisory unit. The amendment also included contingency language, which is based on the passage of legislation authorizing the COLA adjustment. So I think there's a lot of things are covered in that one statement. So yes, I stand in favor of this amendment.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Representative Eastman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate the comments from the member from North Pole. The fact that the COLA adjustment being requested here is not being distributed across all of Alaska. We have today in our budget, we're spending a large sum of money. And it seems year by year that number does go up. It's a very strong trend. Whereas the amount of the dividend that goes to Alaskans does not go up. And how can that be if we are increasing our revenues as a state? Certainly $30 billion last year is a giant increase to our state revenue. That might make for a good argument to increase COLA. Certainly, there are rising costs and price. Others have spoken to those earlier this morning, and yet it's the people of Alaska that are bearing the brunt of that. And were we to separate them from our state government and say that our state government continues to need to grow, but Alaskans, their expectations, what's left of their dividend, that doesn't need to grow, that's an inequity that I think we will be wise to oppose at this time.
Representative Hopkins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just need to declare a conflict. My spouse is could be one of these employees as well under this amendment.
There's been an objection. Representative Hopkins, you'll be required to vote. Is there further discussion? In wrap up, Representative Laban.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I guess any adjustment of the nature proposed here in Amendment 10 can be connected to the PFD, and I guess that's just the world we now live in. I'm just a little disappointed that we don't see the benefit to those non-union state employees that have been left behind over the last 5-6 years on cost of living adjustments, and I think it's worthy of us to consider helping to protect their financial interests. I don't know who else will, and on that note, Madam Speaker, I do wish the body would approve and vote yes on Amendment 10.
Are you ready for the question? Question is, shall Amendment number 10 to Committee Substitute for House Bill 281 pass the House? Members may proceed to vote. Will the clerk please lock the roll? Does any member wish to change his or her vote? Will the clerk please announce the vote?
7 yeas, 32 nays.
With 7 yeas and 32 nays, Amendment number 10 has failed to pass the House. Madam Clerk.
Amendment number 11 by Representatives Eastman and Kirka, beginning page 82, line 7.
Representative Eastman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move amendment number 11.
There's been an objection. Representative Eastman.
Thank you. The amendment before us would make an additional appropriation from the earnings reserve, and that would fund the amount of a statutory dividend. It would not take away from the priorities that others in this body have placed in the budget, where they are currently allocating general revenue funds to go. It would recognize that to be a dividend, in keeping with our state statute, the funds should not come from our general fund, but should come directly as a transfer from our earnings reserve account. Looked at the numbers for the earnings reserve account. Numbers as of this morning that I saw were 17 billion, 16.8 to be precise. And that, of course, is the account from which money is to be taken for the dividend. That account will not suffer irreparable damage by this amount. The total amount for this year's full statutory dividend would be $2.764 billion. That is, I believe, a fair expectation of the people, and it is entirely in keeping with the legislature to honor those statutory and historic expectations. Just because someone says the legislature can transfer or appropriate a smaller amount doesn't change the expectation strongly felt by so many Alaskans that we would honor the statute that's been on the books for about 4 decades now. We failed to honor that expectation at our expense and at the people's expense. If there is the will in this body to change the statute with consultation of the people, then I think that would have already happened by now. I haven't seen that will, certainly not with the consultation of the people. But if that's to be the path forward, by all means, let that be pursued. But let's honor the statute that's on the books today. Let's honor the expectation of so many Alaskans, and let's follow the law. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further discussion on amendment number 11? Hearing none, in wrap-up, Representative Kirka. I don't know why I can't see that.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just hiding over here in your blind spot. I rise in support of the amendment. I appreciate the maker of the amendment directing the funds from the ERA where they're supposed to come from. Madam Speaker, the cry from Alaskans has been very clear. Follow the law. Pay us our dividend. I don't even know what the ratio is in terms of the number of Alaskans who have said, hey, I don't want my dividend, use it for state government, versus those who say, no, I actually want my dividend, I need my dividend. Follow the law. Follow the law. If there's an effort to be had to change the law, to change the formula, we should have that discussion. But just because some don't like the law doesn't mean we should just stop following it. Madam Speaker, this is the right thing to do.
Thank you. Representative Wool.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to remind members there's a lot of talk about following the law, but what this amendment does is a 7.86% POMV draw. That exceeds the 5%, which is a law. So it's an overdraw amendment. I just want to remind members of that. Also, mentions of $16 billion in the earnings reserve. There's $10 billion uncommitted. You know, things earn money in the stock market and so on, but until you sell them, it's unrealized. Also, some of that money is committed to this year's POMV draw. So $16 billion isn't really an accurate number, and this amendment reflects an overdraw.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Representative Carpenter.
You just, Madam Speaker, just very briefly, it's a policy call we're making here. Current budget's paying 25% of your POMV draw to the dividend. It's a 25-75 split, 75% for government, 25 for the permanent fund dividend. This amendment, if it were to pass, would be to pay 50% of a 21% of net earnings draw, as opposed to 25% of a 5% POMV. If that, you might have to replay that to follow all of that, but that's in essence what we're doing. I believe that for decades the statute has worked, and that the people expect that the traditional formula based on 21% of net earnings and sharing 50% of that between the dividend and the state government is the right way to go. It's the right policy for the state. And if that means that the state has less government, less government's good too, but if the state has less revenue, less resources to pay for state services, then we have to have that conversation as well. But the appropriate policy is not to not have that conversation and take the money out of the PFD payment. That is the wrong way to go. So I'm in support of this amendment, even though it's going to die.
Further debate? In wrap-up, Representative Eastman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, I want to point out that currently the bill before us does not limit the amount of money that we're taking out of the earnings reserve account to anything approaching the limit in SB 26. How do I know that? Well, I know that the amount being sent to the general fund for whatever purposes, added with the $1 billion that we are taking out of the earnings reserve account and putting into the corpus, exceeds that threshold by, what, about $1 billion? Further, when we actually look at the statute that is on the books, and we look at the amount that is supposed to be taken from the earnings reserve account and transferred, not appropriated, but transferred to the dividend fund for the payment of dividends, we come out to the amount that is here in this statute. Right now, under the bill, we have a dividend of something less than 28% of the calculated statutory amount. We have a supplement of an energy check, which is about twice that when you add it all together. We have, right now, when you add both of those together, 56% of a full dividend. This amendment accomplishes the purpose of moving that 56% to 100%, which is a fair and reasonable expectation that every Alaskan would have when they look at the books, they see the statute, see the legislature passed the statute some time ago, and this legislature should follow that statute, or with consultation of the people, should work to change it.
Thank you. Are you ready for the question? The question is, shall amendment number 11 to committee substitute for House Bill 281 pass the House? Members may proceed to vote. Will the clerk please lock the roll? Does any member wish to change his or her vote? Will the clerk please announce the vote?
16 yeas, 23 nays.
With 16 yeas and 23 nays, amendment number 11 has failed to pass the House. Madam Clerk.
Amendment number 12 by Representative Eastman, beginning page 76, lines 28 through 29.
Representative Eastman.
Thank you. I move Amendment 12.
There's been an objection.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Amendment 12 is offered begrudgingly because the last amendment it was hoped would have passed. Since it did not, I am faced with having to prioritize between two good causes. And the two good causes I'm referring to are the Alaska Permanent Fund dividend to all Alaskans and the appropriation elsewhere in this budget to pay oil and tax credits, which is to say to purchase from holders of those oil and tax credits, those credits. And we have currently in the budget appropriated more than $500 million for purchase of those credits. I distributed a memo from our director of our legal services, which was on members' desk earlier, and that explains that there is no statutory expectation or requirement or guidance that $500 million be spent to purchase oil tax credits. I think that there are very strong and sound economic reasons to pay those credits. I support paying those credits, but when it comes to a question of following the letter of the law, which, of course, I'm talking about following the dividend fund, versus making a strong economic argument for why it is that these oil and tax credits should be passed, while I do support payment of oil tax credits, the law must come first.
Madam Clerk.
Amendment number 1 to amendment number 12 by Representative Rauscher, beginning page 1, lines 1 through 4 of the amendment.
Representative Rauscher.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move amendment number 1 to amendment number 12.
Hearing no, there's been an objection. Representative Rauscher.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate it very much. This amendment, what it does is still allows the permanent fund dividend amount to be paid out, but it also speaks to the funding for the oil tax credits. The House Bill 287 went through the process here in the House. It ended up in Finance, and there were, the members from District 9, District 8, District 6, 24, 30, 29, 13, 12, 31, 11, 22, 3. All these supported paying the tax credits for a partial of these tax credits that we're talking about here, which are going to be raised by this amendment. This doesn't stop anything else from happening. It just says that those the oil tax credits are very important to this body. They were voted. Part of that is $60 million, which didn't get paid from last year, which was owed, which didn't happen. And so that money needs to actually come forward this year and be taken care of, in my opinion, and I believe the rest of the people who sponsored this bill believe that. I believe since it's in the budget, the Finance Committee believes that, and the oil companies, they go out there and they do their work. We entice them with this process, and they did it. They brought back some oil, and then we said, whoa, wait a minute, we may be a little short. And so we keep doing that often. And so what this does is it corrects those wrongs. And here we are trying to do that again. Say, well wait a minute, I know you're paying for the permanent fund dividend with the oil that you bring. You went out and did what we asked you to do. And So thank you, Madam Speaker. I see my time is up.
Thank you, Representative Rauscher. Briefities. Oh, I cut him off. Please come back to order. I made an error there, not recognizing the fact that Representative Rauscher was the maker of this amendment, so he has an additional minute if you'd like to utilize it, Representative Rauscher.
I appreciate it very much. Anyway, the oil companies do pay for the permanent fund dividend, which we give out to everybody this year if you apply. It's not a giveaway. You have to apply, and it's part of the process that we have in statute. And so I believe we need to be, if we have partners in the industry, we need to keep those partners partners. We need to quit changing policy every year, and we also need to let them be sure that we're good for our word year after year, and that's what that money does. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Representative Eastman. Representative Eastman.
I believe another member has their mic raised.
I believe you had your microphone up earlier before the
I do,
briefing.
and I'm glad to speak now. Thank you, Madam Speaker. The amendment before us is to delete the appropriation from the oil and tax credits and simply leave an addition to our budget. So currently, Amendment 12 is unamended, is budget neutral. It adds no money to the budget. It simply says that given two competing priorities, our oil and gas tax credits versus the dividend, that the dividend would come first. This amendment would alter that arrangement and would say that the oil and tax credits and the dividend will come first, but only if the amendment passes. So I will be opposing the amendment because it would have the effect of increasing the budget, and the budget amendment proposed, Amendment 12, was written specifically so that it would be budget neutral, so that members would not have to increase the budget. They would simply be able to acknowledge that while there is support for payment of oil and tax credits, there is also support for money to Alaskans at the current time. I would also say that from the memo that was distributed earlier, those who hold these credits currently have two options to redeem them. They can sell them on the secondary market, or they can redeem them through production of oil, which, as you know, the price of oil is somewhat high right now. And so there are lots of options for redeeming those production tax credits. This amendment would effectively reserve that third option for us to simply purchase them outright.
Thank you. Representative Rasmussen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wanted to rise in support of this amendment. I think that the most important thing that we can do as a state is to make good on our word. I've tried to consistently support whatever statutes we have on the books, and we do have statutes, although there's a memo that may create an appearance that we don't have to pay right now, but I think ultimately it comes to the moral question of, are we going to stand behind our word? We asked oil companies and private companies to come to Alaska and explore. We recognize that a lot of the legacy fields were starting to become depleted, and in order to continue the jobs and the state revenue that we need, it meant we needed new projects and exploration. And to not pay this when we have the money available, while I completely agree that we want to be able to share a portion of the wealth with Alaskans, we will have no wealth if we don't have the companies, the private companies that are investing hundreds of millions to billions of dollars of their private capital money to do these projects. So I will be opposing this, and I would ask for, I support this amendment, sorry, and I would ask for the members' support on this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative McCurdy.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Again, this is, reiterates that today's Tuesday, and as Wimpy said, that I'll gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today. We have stated to all these businesses for the oil tax credit that we would pay them, and let's honor that and take care of it on Tuesday. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative McCabe.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Mostly I want to talk a little bit about these oil tax credits because many of our constituents don't understand exactly what they are. We're actually not paying them, we're buying them back. The oil companies own them. We're obligated morally, as the representative from Sand Lake said, to buy them back. I had two amendments earlier to do away with a portion of these oil tax credits to fund something else until I got to looking into this yesterday. There's a little bit more going on here. There are 3 of these smaller companies that could use these oil tax credits. They have shovel-ready, if you will, projects ready to go. So by buying these back or by paying these tax credits, we're actually funding jobs. We're funding an increase. We're funding drilling. We're funding a lot of stuff for these smaller companies, which was exactly, what these oil tax credits were designed to do. They were designed to bring in competition. They were designed to help the smaller oil companies drill new rigs, new jobs. So I support this amendment. I think it's really great, and I fully support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Prox.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of this amendment as well. We have 2 obligations before us, paying a debt and paying a dividend. And in the corporate world, you pay your debts before your dividend, and you also wouldn't pay a dividend unless spending it somewhere else was going to make less money. And paying off, using the oil tax credits to pay a dividend is the wrong approach in my mind, because we are going to, in fact, get a greater return in many ways from paying those credits off, restoring our reputation somewhat in the business world. So, yeah, I support this amendment. We shouldn't be taking the dividend payment out of the tax credits. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Representative Wolf.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Madam Speaker, I'm sorry. This amendment to the amendment, I support oil tax credits. Let's just say that. And in finance, we funded them, and they're in the budget. So that's not really debate here, how valuable the oil tax credits are. And the amendment to the amendment keeps the oil tax credits in. But the underlying amendment basically says take the oil tax credit money and pay it out into extra dividend. But if you take the amendment to the amendment, we won't take the oil tax credit money out, but we'll take that same amount that it's equal to and pay it into extra dividends. It doesn't really make sense. I understand the underlying amendment makes sense. Don't pay the oil tax credits, give it to people's dividend. But if you also keep the oil tax credits in, now we're just arbitrarily adding to the dividend by that same amount, but we're not saving the money anywhere. So I don't support the underlying amendment, nor either one of them.
Thank you. Is there further discussion on the amendment to the amendment? Representative Rauscher in wrap-up. Oh, briefly. Will the House please come back to order? Will the House please come back to order? We are on amendment number 1 to amendment number 12. Representative Rauscher, in wrap-up.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate everybody that had a chance to speak. I would like to thank a member in District 5, and I get what he's saying, but, you know, if this worries him, he could always vote yes on this and no on the next one. But anyway, what this amendment does, it speaks to our partners in the industry. These are the people who are trusting us in our partnership. They're trusting us for our word. It has been stated in many committees over and over in the past year, in the past years, that it's getting harder and harder for investors to want to invest in Alaska because they want to see us keep our word. They want to see us not change our policies every 2 years. They want to make sure that their partners are partners with them. And I believe this will go a long way, besides providing jobs, besides providing fields that will be able to open up again because of monies that they could use. We have to remember that there are companies that went bankrupt because we have not kept up our part of the bargain. They've gone bankrupt in the past. They've had to sell their share, pennies on a dollar, to other companies and banks in the process. This is not the legacy that we'd like to offer the state of Alaska and the people of Alaska, nor our partners in the industry. I just urge you all to vote yes on this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you ready for the question? Question is, shall amendment number 1 to amendment number 12 pass the House? Members may proceed to vote. Would the clerk please lock the roll? Does any member wish to change his or her vote? Representative Josephson.
Yes.
Representative Schrage.
Yes.
Huh.
We have to go one at a time, so Josephson needs to press his button.
Oh, Josephson, you need to press the, change your button. Re-
Oh, wait, where'd it go?
Representative Schrage. Representative Hannan.
Yes.
Representative Hopkins. Are there any others who would wish to change their vote? Will the clerk please lock the roll? Would clerk please announce the vote?
24 yeas, 15 nays.
With 24 yeas and 15 nays, amendment number 1 to amendment number 12 has passed the House. We are now back to amendment number 12. Is there any debate on amendment number 12? Representative Josephson.
Madam Speaker, taking the offer of the amendment's word, and I mean, it's self-evident, the bill is now not cost neutral. By my reckoning, with the addition of the energy relief, it results in a dividend that is unsustainable, depending on how you define dividend, and we don't need the protection this affords to the oil tax credits. They're built into the budget. I supported them, and the amendment should be defeated. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further debate? Representative McKay.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I had a long 2-minute speech prepared on this subject, but I'll try to keep it a short 2 minutes. Obviously, I support the payment of the oil tax credits to the maximum amount that we possibly can. I think it would be good for us now while oil prices are high, to go ahead and pay them off, get this off our books, get it behind us. I appreciate the remarks from my colleagues and also from colleagues across the aisle. I appreciate the bipartisan support. Madam Speaker, we have record high oil prices in Alaska. We have, $100 to $110 oil, but we're really not seeing the uptick in activity that we should be seeing. And part of that is because of the embargo, if you will, by the large banks to loan on Arctic operations. Obviously, we've mentioned the other obstacles, the federal administration, the courts. I'm very concerned. We have, as I mentioned before today, we have no representation in Congress for several months here, so I'm very concerned about our private sector industry. I think by paying as much of these tax credits as we can, it will help kickstart our private sector economy in Alaska. I know that there are shovel-ready projects ready to go that several companies would like to undertake almost immediately if they can gather up the cash. So we kind of control our own future here, at least in the short term. If we can get this money into the hands of the private sector, they can invest, they can provide good-paying private sector jobs on the Kenai Peninsula as well as on the slope. So I want to thank everyone, and I think the body understands how important this is. So I encourage support of paying the oil tax credits. Thank you.
Representative McKay, I think you may have a misinterpretation of this bill, if I'm not mistaken, of the amendment number 12. Am I correct? Brief it is. Am I? Representative McKay, you were right on. I was forgetting that we had amended this, so pardon me for the correction there.
Madam Speaker, I want to thank you for not interrupting me, and I want to thank you. That was a rehearsal for amendments 21 and 22 to come.
Perfect. Okay, so with that, we are back to amendment number 12 as amended. If there is no further discussion, Representative Eastman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I urge support for this amendment, even in its amended state. I thought that the amendment is not bad, because I think there's a strong economic argument for funding these oil and gas tax credits. I would urge members to support, particularly if you were among the 24 members who voted yes on the amendment a moment ago. Of course, voting yes on the amendment a moment ago was to vote in favor of forward funding our oil and gas tax credits. So I would certainly not want to encourage anyone to vote in favor of forward funding our oil and gas tax credits, and then in this vote against the dividend on that same amount. Thank you.
Are you ready for the question? The question is, shall amendment number 12 as amended to committee substitute for House Bill 281 pass the House? Members may proceed to vote. Will the clerk please lock the roll? Does any member wish to change his or her vote? Will the clerk please announce the vote?
15 yeas, 24 nays.
With 15 yeas and 24 nays, amendment number 12 as amended has failed to pass the House. Madam Clerk.
Amendment number 13 by Representatives Kirka and Eastman, beginning page 82, following line 12.
Representative Eastman.
I move amendment number 13.
There's been an objection. Representative Eastman.
Thank you. The amount before you is $6.207 billion. That is the cumulative total of the last 6 years that the dividend has gone underappropriated by the legislature. And restoring this amount would make up for the underfunding of the dividend that we have done these last 6 years. As was spoken before, last year, state received approximately $30 billion. The earnings reserve account has roughly $17 billion, about over $10 billion, which is currently unallocated, shall we say, not sent to any particular purpose. And this amount would, late, admittedly very late, but would make good on the obligations that we have to the residents of Alaska. We have forward funding in the budget right now for oil and gas tax credits. We have forward funding for education, but we haven't even gone back to back fund our dividend obligations. And certainly if we're forward funding for these other things, then we need at the same time to pay our debts on our dividends. Thank you.
Is there further debate? Representative Kirka.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I believe this is actually my amendment, but I will still try to stick to the 2-minute introduction.
I have it marked for him.
So, Madam Speaker, the state has been in political turmoil since 2016, when the previous governor decided to veto a portion of the dividend payment. And every year since then, either the governor or the legislature has opted not to pay it. And I don't know how to say this with more emphasis in a way that's still polite, but the people are enraged. Alaskans are enraged. We see that in the incredible turnover rate in this body, which you may argue is a healthy thing. I certainly think it can be a healthy thing. But, Madam Speaker, that the people have been shortchanged. They don't get to develop, like in Texas, like I said previously, they don't get to develop the resources under their land and build the economy. They depend on the royalty payments, so to speak, through the dividend, through the permanent fund, and those investments and the return on investment. They depend on us paying that to them. It's their money, Madam Speaker. This would do so much to stimulate the economy. Right now, it's being invested outside of Alaska, and is not helping our economy, not helping Alaskans. This money should be paid out to the people, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Prox.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of this amendment. It's interesting that the court decision, the Wilikowski decision, which I have some problems with, but at any rate, it's there. But it just said that the appropriation for the dividend an appropriation is required to transfer money into the dividend fund. It didn't address the underlying question of whether those that were eligible for the fund were in fact eligible for the fund, which they are. So that's still an open question, it's still in the books. And if you read all the different funds and things that the legislature promises, that there's always a preface subject to appropriation. But in that particular section of statute, it is not subject to appropriation. It's subject to the individuals applying for the fund, and then they're eligible for an amount to be determined by a formula. So the Wilikowski decision didn't change that. It's still on the books. There is an unpaid amount that is about this sum that doesn't belong to us. It belongs to the people who applied for the dividend at the time and had every expectation of the legislature making good on its promise. So, yep, big number. We should keep paying our debts, not let them build up as we have, but always a mistake. You're always a promise made is a debt unpaid. I believe that's Robert Service. Sam McGee, I think, is the poetry. But we should pay this debt. We certainly owe it. It's black and white in statute that money is owed to the people.
Thank you. Representative Rasmussen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I find this kind of in an interesting position right now because I believe that we have roughly $10 billion of uncommitted dollars in the earnings reserve, and I think we have roughly $3.4 billion for FY23 spending, which leaves just above the proposed sum of $6.2 billion in this amendment. So, I mean, I think there's been proposals in prior legislatures to essentially liquidate the remainder of the fund and have a one-time last payout for Alaskans. Maybe this is the avenue to do that, and I don't know what the future of the program would look like moving forward because we are constitutionally barred from spending money out of the corpus. So without money remaining in the earnings reserve, I guess we don't have any money for dividends anymore, but just something to think about when we make our decision on this vote. I know that, you know, it's in statute and we need to pay our debts, as I stated before, for the private sector. So that's a tough decision in front of us. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Carpenter.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, $6.2 billion, that's a big number. That's a lot of dividend. It's a lot of dividend that didn't get paid in the past years. And wouldn't it be a surprise to all Alaskans if that showed up in their bank account this year? You know, this it's a perfect opportunity to kind of talk to a higher question. What is the purpose of the permanent fund? And I've got less than 2 minutes to summarize my thoughts on this. You know, there were some folks when we created the permanent fund dividend program that were opposed to the dividend program. The understanding at the time was that the oil royalties going into the permanent fund and then being turned into a renewable resource ought to exist solely for the purpose of paying for government. And other folks said, hey, you know what, I think that's not the sole purpose of the permanent fund. And so we have the permanent fund dividend that returns some of those royalties and the earnings from those royalties to the people. We now are on a trajectory with this budget to pay a 25-75 split of our permanent fund earnings. And that is down from what was traditionally a 50-50 split of the 21% of net earnings. So this is headed in the wrong direction as far as I'm concerned and as far as the people were concerned that opposed spending all of our permanent fund earnings on state government. But I think that's the direction we're headed. So if that's the direction we're headed, that we're going to spend all of our earnings from the permanent fund on state government, then what's the purpose of having a big permanent fund? It's to pay for state government and more of it. To the extent that our state government could theoretically grow to the size of the permanent fund. Whatever the earning size is, that's how much government we can have. And I'm not in agreement with that. So as I'm wrapping up my 2 minutes, I would just say that if the alternative is paying $6 billion out and getting it into the private sector, then that is preferable to a permanent fund that continuously grows and feeds an unfettered state government.
Thank you. Is there further debate? Representative Kirka in wrap-up.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I very much agree with the member from North Pole. his comments. The member from North Kenai. As a member from District 10 mentioned, the state brought in almost $30 billion last year. And here we're squabbling over paying Alaskans the money that's been taken literally as a regressive tax or theft, whichever you want to call it. I'm not sure what the best emphasis to put on that over the last 6 years. I think this will be pretty clear to Alaskans.
Thank you. Are you ready for the question? Question is, shall amendment number 13 to committee substitute for House Bill 281 pass the House? Members may proceed to vote. Will the clerk please lock the roll? Does any member wish to change his or her vote? Will the clerk please announce the vote?
16 yeas, 23 nays.
With 16 yeas and 23 nays, amendment number 13 has failed to pass the House. Madam Clerk.
Amendment number 14 by Representatives Eastman and Kirka, beginning page 82, following line 12.
Representative Eastman.
Thank you. I move Amendment 14.
There's been an objection. Representative Eastman.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate the 14 members who voted in support of the previous amendment. This is going to be a smaller portion of that, starting with the amount that has been withheld from the people for the longest period of time. So the oldest debt starting in 2016, which is $683 million. And hopefully we can, somewhere in the following amendments, we can find that magic number 20 or 21. Thank you.
Is there further debate? Representative Josephson.
Just very, very briefly, I would just note that the administration does not support this amendment. And I know we don't work for the administration, we work for constituents, but this is not something sought by the administration. Thank you.
Thank you. Further debate? Representative Prox, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I guess I agree with the previous speaker. I don't know that the administration has requested that, nor do I know that they're opposed to it. I haven't heard a thing from anybody in the administration about this, but we just decided not to pay the whole debt. Okay, fine, but when you have overdrawn your credit cards or whatever, you can make an arrangement with your creditors and you can make a good faith payment towards what is owed to them. And we need to start doing that. If we don't, we're going to find ourselves in a worse position next year, one more year of not repaying, and then we aren't going to have enough money in the earnings reserve to pay that. So we need to start paying, at the very least, we need to start paying our debt down to the people, not to anyone else. It's not our money, it's the people's money. We should start paying it. Thank you.
Thank you. Brief it is.
Hello, my fellow Alaskans. I'm sorry I was gone there for a little while. I had to go do some work. I'd like to give a big shout out to my kiddo for getting this video started for us all here so that we could catch the second half of this great budget debate going on down there. Oh, they're back.
Back to order. Is there further debate? Speak to your point of order, Representative Eastman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I bring to your attention Section 111.1. Again, as was stated previously, we don't work for the governor, but as was not supposed to happen, we are not supposed to use the fact that the governor supports or opposes or has no position to influence any member's vote on this floor.
Thank you for that, Representative Eastman. And in wrap-up, Representative Eastman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Governors aside, the amount for 2016 dividend is laid before you, and I ask for your support.
Are you ready for the question? Question is, shall Amendment Number 14 to Committee Substitute for House Bill 281 pass the House? Members may proceed to vote. Will the clerk please lock the roll? Does any member wish to change his or her vote? Will the clerk please announce a vote?
16 yeas, 21 nays.
With 16 yeas and 21 nays, Amendment Number 14 has failed to pass the House. Brief at ease.
So Amendment Number 13 and 14 have both failed to pass the House. Not surprising by this one bit. They continue to vote along the legal binding caucus's lines. The 23 to 24, it's usually a 22 to 17 vote going on there, and that because one member is missing. And it consistently keeps coming out the exact same way. The illegal binding caucus, the House Majority Coalition, who formed at the beginning of the year. Kelly Merrick helped make that happen. So did Rep. Tilton and a few others that are inside of that place down there. And they gave the corrupt Democrats all control, which is very evident by the budget that we see in front of us today.
Madam Clerk.
18 by Representatives Eastman and Kirka, beginning page 82, following line 12.
Representative Eastman.
Thank you. I move 15.
There's been an objection. Representative Eastman.
Thank you. This amendment is more recent. This is for 2017's unpaid dividend.
Is there further discussion? Seeing none. Brief at ease. Brief at ease.
All these guys just can never make up their minds what they want to do or when they want to do it. So far by my count, we're on the 10th bill for paying a PFD every single time it gets being voted down by the illegal binding caucus party lines controlled by the House Majority Coalition.
In wrap up, Representative Eastman. Are you ready for the question? Brief at ease. Will the House please come to order? You've withdrawn your... Could you say that on the record, please?
Yes, I withdraw my call in the House.
Thank you. Are you ready for the question? The question is, shall Amendment Number 15 to Committee Substitute for House Bill 281 pass the House? Members may proceed to vote. Will the clerk please lock the roll? Does any member wish to change his or her vote? Will the clerk please announce the vote?
16 yeas, 23 nays.
With 16 yeas and 23 nays, amendment number 15 has failed to pass the House. Madam Clerk.
Amendment number 16 by Representatives Eastman and Kirka, beginning page 82, following line 12.
Representative Eastman.
I move 16.
There's been an objection. Representative Eastman.
Thank you. More recent still, this is the withdrawn PFD amounts for 2018. We have 16 votes on the previous one. Can we see 17?
Is there debate? Seeing none, in wrap-up, Representative Eastman, are you ready for the question? The question is, shall amendment number 16 to committee substitute for House Bill 281 pass the House? Members may proceed to vote. Will the clerk please lock the roll? Does any member wish to change his or her vote? Will the clerk please announce the vote?
16 yeas, 23 nays.
With 16 yeas and 23 nays, amendment number 16 has failed to pass the House. Madam Clerk.
Amendment number 17 by Representatives Eastman and Kirka, beginning page 82, following line 12.
Representative Eastman.
Thank you. I move 17.
There's been an objection. Representative Eastman.
Thank you. This is the unpaid dividends for 2019. Previously, those were vetoed by the Walker administration. Now we're into the Dunleavy administration. Thank you.
Is there any debate? In wrap-up, Representative Eastman. Are you ready for the question? The question is, shall amendment number 17 to committee substitute for House Bill 281 pass the House? Members may proceed to vote. Will the clerk please lock the roll? Does any member wish to change his or her vote? Will the clerk please announce the vote?
16 yeas, 23 nays.
With 16 yeas and 23 nays, amendment number 17 has failed to pass the House. Madam Clerk.
Amendment number 18 by Representatives Eastman and Kirka, beginning page 82, following line 12.
Representative Eastman.
I move 18.
There's been an objection. Representative Eastman.
Thank you. We're down to our last two options here. This is for year 20 dividends, and the amount is before members. This is the unpaid amount from the 2020 dividend.
Is there any debate? Representative Rasmuson.
Speaker, I believe that this amendment starts the period for the 31st legislature when there is a change in administration. So for those who were concerned about what the administration is doing, this would be the start of that, I believe.
Okay, and I'm going to remind members that the administration has no effect on the actions of this body and should not be referred to. And with that, is there any further debate? Representative Eastman, in wrap-up.
Thank you. And the distinction between administrations doesn't have to do with the administration. It has to do with the fact that this was a decision made by our legislature, initiated by our legislature, and signed off by our legislature. That's it. Thank you.
Are you ready for the question? Question is, shall amendment number 18 to committee substitute for House Bill 281 pass the House? Members may proceed to vote. Will the clerk please lock the roll? Does any member wish to change his or her vote? Will the clerk please announce the vote?
17 yeas, 22 nays.
With 17 yeas and 22 nays, amendment number 18 has failed to pass the House. Madam Clerk.
Amendment number 19 by Representatives Eastman and Kirka, beginning page 82, following line 12.
Representative Eastman.
Thank you. I move 19.
There's been an objection. Representative Eastman.
Thank you. And this is the final of this series of amendments, and this is to pay the unpaid dividend from last year's dividend, 2021. I saw we had 17 votes in the last amendment. Looking for that magic number 21.
Thank you. Is there further debate? In wrap-up, Representative Eastman. Are you ready for the question? The question is, shall amendment number 19 to committee substitute for House Bill 281 pass the House? Members may proceed to vote. Will the clerk please lock the roll? Does any member wish to change his or her vote? Will the clerk please announce the vote?
17 yeas, 22 nays.
With 17 yeas and 22 nays, amendment number 19 has failed to pass the House. Madam Clerk.
Amendment number 20 by Representatives Eastman and Kirka, beginning page 82, following line 12.
Representative Eastman.
Thank you. I move 20.
There's been an objection. Representative Eastman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Appreciate the objection so I can explain the amendment. Unlike the previous series of amendments, this doesn't pay back pay on any of the amendments from 2016 to 2021. But it does recognize that by withholding dividends from Alaskans, the state of Alaska made a tidy sum of money. In fact, that amount of money is north of $1.5 billion that the state of Alaska gained in addition to the amount that was withheld from dividends. And so in recognition of that surplus, this amendment does not give any of the dividends back to the people of Alaska. This simply acknowledges that this money should rightfully go to the people of Alaska. Thank you.
Is there further debate? Brief it is. Will the House please come back to order? In wrap-up, Representative Eastman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Not much more to say other than I believe this is the final amendment dealing with, in fact, the only amendment dealing with the interest on withheld dividends, and I ask for member support.
Are you ready for the question? Question is, shall amendment number 20 to committee substitute for House Bill 281 pass the House? Members may proceed to vote. Will the clerk please lock the roll? Does any member wish to change his or her vote? Will the clerk please announce the vote?
16 yeas, 23 nays.
With 16 yeas and 23 nays, amendment number 20 has failed to pass the House. Madam Clerk.
Amendments number 21 and 22 will not be offered.
Brief it is.
Wow, okay, so amendments 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19 were all amendments to pay back what they previously had stolen from all of us here in Alaska. Oh, they're back.
Calendar. Madam Clerk.
Amendment number 23 by Representative McCabe, beginning page 77, following line 27.
Representative McCabe.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Something different for a change. So, as a conservative Republican, I'm sorry, thank you. We're moving so fast, I totally forgot. I move Amendment 23.
There's been an objection, Representative McCabe. Thank you, Representative Laban.
You're a prince. So, as a conservative Republican, I'm struggling with this one. This is a lot of money. It's a project. It's a project that's been in development for a while. It's a project that the state and the borough, Matsu Borough, started together, and then we ran out of money or ran out of steam or ran out of the ability or gumption to do it. So this First Amendment covers two projects. It's $190 million to complete the rail extension from Port Mac to Houston. I drive across that rail bed every day when I go home, and it irks me that we never finished it. We have $187 million invested in it, and it's the world's largest snowmobile trail. I think you've all heard me say that before, the most expensive snowmobile trail. The other $203 million expands capacity at the Titan liquid natural gas plant at Port Mac, which is owned by Interior Gas Utility, and it runs it from 50,000 gallons per day to 150,000. It completes the rails from Irishar to Houston, as I said, and the rail spur into the LNG plant. The reason this is important, we've talked about all day, is the increase in fuel. I read one thing the other day that said fuel, oil, heating oil in the Fairbanks North Star Borough was going to approach $9 a gallon next heating season. So this amendment would help with that eventually when we get some liquid natural gas up to the Fairbanks North Star Borough. It funds the Alaska Rail Belt Clean Energy Transportation Infrastructure Growth Cluster. This project involves towns, cities, boroughs, chambers, councils, development corporations, utility, railroads, and I won't say the administration because I'm not supposed to.
And you're not rating either, are you?
No, ma'am, I'm sure not.
Okay.
In our DC representatives, it's the list. I didn't want to forget, I didn't want to leave anybody out. So it has written support from House Districts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11, 12, and I believe some others have signed on today as well. Senate Districts A, B, C, D, E, and F. Other support, Alaska Railroad, Interior Gas Utility, Fairbanks North Star Borough, Matsu Borough, Denali Borough, Alaska's entire DC delegation. There are 15 people or 15 entities on this list. This builds Alaska. I wouldn't be doing it if it didn't. It has a return on investment, unlike a number of other things that we have tried to fund today. It has a big return on investment going forward for our children, which is why I think we're all here. These next series of amendments will fund pieces of it. This is the big one. So if we want to get out of here early, let's vote for this one, and then I'll close out the other two. 3. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further debate? Do you say briefities? Briefities.
So the irony going on down there in Juneau just is not beneath me to not notice it. Sarah Rasmuson, Rep. Rasmussen, has made it very clear she's been the 16th vote, 17th vote that has flipped every single time when it comes to the yays and nays for the losing minority for every single amendment that keeps coming forward. The only time you will see the House Majority Coalition, the Illegal Binding Caucus, vote in conjunction with any of the amendments that have been brought forward so far is when they're introducing a poison pill an amendment to an amendment. They've done it twice now, two different bills. Two different times they have introduced poison pills that outright kill it, like the one using the oil tax credits instead of paying them $500 million, using that money for Alaskans PFD, because Alaskans PFD has first call on that money, not the oil companies. But that doesn't stop them from trying to spend it all on us over and over and over again. And you can see by the vote that Sarah Rasmuson voted in line with making sure that the oil companies were protected. And it's just amazing the way these votes continuously keep happening. And it's a 23-16 vote happening right now because Nilsson is out for an excused, for one reason or another, he's not there. But this is why they didn't have these votes last week. The illegal binding caucus majority coalition did not have enough people there to be able to control what was happening there in Juneau for the votes. And if they would have had the full majority, not because their majority was not there, the amendments that you see being brought here today would have passed. The PFD budget debate would have been did over with at the very beginning with the very first amendment that was brought, amendment number 1, paying a full statutory PFD. That amendment would have passed, and they would have moved on, and there would have been 20 less bills for us all to listen to here today. There's 80 plus bills altogether, and they're only on what, number 21? And so this is just another way of them to control and manipulate things using their majority control, those who have sold out their voices and votes. Speaking of voices and votes, there's Kelly Merrick right there. She sold out Eagle River constituents for the unions. Her hubby Merrick, last name of Merrick, they're deeply involved with the unions. The unions have bought and paid for her vote to be a yes with the illegal binding caucus. And it was made very evident this year that's exactly the way she's voting. Everything that she's voting on right now is in line with that illegal binding caucus. And it's just atrocious to know this is going on, that it's allowed in Juneau, that they can be this corrupt and still have their jobs, openly lying to us all. I listened to Sarah Rasmussen make that claim earlier, that to pay back everything that was owed to us Alaskans, and one of the bills that the amendments they had brought forward for to be looking at was to pay back everything they had stolen, be about $6 billion. And Eastman had pointed out there's $10 billion surplus sitting there out of the $17 billion that is in the ERA. There was $10 billion excess that had not been attached to anything, including the POMV. And that out of that $10 billion, they could have pulled $6 billion out of it and paid back everything they have stolen over the last 6 years from each and every Alaskan, and still had a $4 billion surplus sitting there in revenue earnings just in this past year. But Sarah Rasmussen said, well, if we're going to do that, why don't we just dissolve the entire PFD corporation and get rid of it and just give a one-time payment to all Alaskans? That's what you're asking us to do here. Oh, my God, we're going to burn down the house just because we're going to take a small portion, not even 10% of what's sitting there in the fund, and go and spend it on Alaskans where it's supposed to have gone over these last 6 years. Oh, the hysteria. I just want to, oh my God, help me out here, folks, to know that, oh, it's going to destroy the fund, so I'm going to take it to the furthest extreme you could ever ask for, and we're just going to dissolve the whole fund. That's what this bill is that you have in front of us, this amendment, just paying back the $6 billion that's been stolen all of these years. Oh, man, the temper tantrum, and they get away with this stuff. And it's just unbelievable that these lies can be said on the floor and they go unchecked. They are allowed to state them on the floor. Nobody is allowed to correct them. If any legislator who spent their 2 minutes after her little speech to correct her, they would have been censored and told they are not allowed to speak and they have to shut their mouth. Louise Stutes would have been pounding her gavel on top of the desk saying, you're out of line, you're not allowed to speak bad about another member there. But if it was the opposite way around, say that Chris Tuck or Bryce Edgman or anybody like that was to speak bad about another Republican, the minority there, one of the minority that's in the room, if they were to speak bad about the minority there and say stuff like that, Louise Stutz would be pretending that she didn't hear a thing. She'd be Tweety, little Tweety birds floating around the top of her head, looking at them all, going, oh man, such pretty colors. And this would be the answer that you would get. Would she censor them? Nope, she would allow it to happen. But the minute it went the other direction, she would completely slam that gavel down on the ground. So far, we're listening to the budget debate for the House Bill 281. We haven't even gotten into the mental health budget. That one usually is pretty much a rubber stamp budget. They just hit the gavel and say, oh, we're good to go. Very little amendments ever come out of the mental health budget because it really doesn't change too much. But this budget that they have currently in front of them is astronomically high. And it just I don't know what else to say. We've got these very corrupt legislators. Our only hope is to vote them out. And with ranked choice voting coming up, we have a very good opportunity of putting people into office that have never, ever served in office ever in their entire lives, which I don't know if that's a good thing, but it sure does keep voting in these entrenched legislators that keep coming back year after year after year after year. We got like Josh Kresh Tompkinson this year is not going to be running in this upcoming election. And I think that has a lot to do with the FBI investigation that began back in November is when we got first notice there was an investigation going on. Alaska, according to the FBI, is rated as the most, next to Washington, D.C., that is, the most corrupt government in the United States. And they were up here back in November looking at the pay for play, how many of the legislators down there in Juneau are paying to play. And there's no irony that you've got Natasha von Imhoff announced that she was not going to be running shortly after this investigation was announced and started to get heavy. And that is only just the tip of the iceberg of that investigation. It is going to uncover a lot if they actually pursue it. And I hope they are still pursuing it. The last word I heard anything about it was back in January. And then on the QT through my anonymous sources, so to speak, that mainstream media always seems to throw out there, my anonymous sources say, well, my anonymous sources are directly acknowledgeable to what is happening there in Juneau because they are there in Juneau and they are behind the front lines, deep into the trenches. And they know what is happening there in Juneau, and this investigation is real. The FBI is looking hard at these legislators down there in Juneau for their pay-to-play schemes that they got going on. And the illegal binding caucus that you have in the Alaska House majority there is very evident of that. I will not be surprised if Rep. Kelly Merrick is brought up under investigation, Rep. Ivy Spinonsalds, Bryce Edgman, Louise Stutz, just to name a few, Olson. These legislators have been there so long, they have no problem paying to play. And I really like to know what they have on Kaufman. Kaufman has made it very clear that he is more than happy to vote in line with the illegal binding caucus today. And he has more than once. Oh, they're getting started once again. Let's see, where are they? They said they were getting started. I heard the gavel hit. Okay, I guess they didn't hit the gavel just yet. It sounded like they did there for just a second. She lifted it up and then stopped. But yeah, no, this is getting ridiculous down there in Juneau. I have been posting up all of the pictures of votes that have happened today. I have tried to capture as many as I possibly can. I did have to go to work there for a little while, so I missed out on a couple of bills. I didn't get to hear, or amendments, I didn't get to hear what number 9 was. I caught the vote for number 10, but I don't know what the amendment for number 10 was. And then from then on out, from 11 on, I've got it posted up there on the Facebook page for what the votes were for. And it's always been along the same binding caucus lines. It's either 22 or 23 votes, depending on how Sarah Rasmuson decides to flip each time around on whether that differs. The only time I've seen the votes go even higher than that is when they introduce a poison pill into the bill. That like the one with the oil tax credits, it was supposed to remove the oil tax credit, and then Rauscher put the oil tax, paying them back into it in amendment number 1 to the original amendment. And and of course the illegal binding caucus was all for voting that back in, because they knew by voting that back in, it was no longer a net zero change to the budget, but that would now increase the budget by roughly $500 million, because that's how much they want to pay them out this year for tax credits. So we just got to kind of watch what's going on. Oh, I hear a voice again. Is she telling them all to get there?
Recess until 4 p.m.
Oh, they're done until 4 p.m. today. So thank you all for tuning in here today and watching at this point. I am going to put this on hold for the next 15 minutes. And you guys can watch in the background there. But I've got something that I need to do here real quickly. I will be back in just a minute or two, and we will walk through all of the bills or the amendments that they have heard today. Not a single one of them has passed. I don't think there has been a single amendment that has been presented today that has actually passed inside of the House. But I will be back in just a moment. They're going to be back at 4 o'clock to begin going on with more amendments. So I will be back here in just one moment. Here's something for your guys' entertainment. I hope you enjoy.
Okay, we are back on the record and debating the conference committee report. Is there anyone else that would like to? Senator Von Imhoff.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I just want to make sure that the folks that are listening at home fully understands the consequences for today's actions. A no vote means the budget doesn't pass. 22,000 people, state workers, will be out of work July 1st. That does not include the tens of thousands of teachers and university employees around the state of Alaska. Everyone out of jobs will not be paid. For the reverse sweep, about $130 million will not be funded in the budget. Holes all over the budget. What kind of programs? The whammy. You want doctors? We're not going to pay for them anymore. The Alaska Scholarship Funds, all the folks that are trying to get an education at the university, gone. Remember a couple years ago when that happened? The public didn't like it. There were rallying cries right out in front of our building here. Community assistance, gone. Victims Restitution Fund, gone. The Power Cost Equalization Fund will be swept. All of those programs will not be funded. With the CBR vote not being funded, there'll be small to nearly nothing capital budget. No oil tax credits paid at all. 2/3 of the school bond debt reimbursement gone, not funded. Think about all of these year-round jobs, good pay with benefits that support families, gone. Nothing. Nada. Hey, if you drive over a bridge, I suggest you hold your breath and pray, because it could fall on you, because no one's going to be around to fix it. If you want a permit to mine, nope, not going to happen. If you're on food stamps and you call up and ask someone to process your application, no one will answer the phone. If you're on Medicaid and you need emergency surgery, no one's going to authorize it because no one will answer the phone. Medicaid will be shut down. You call a state trooper, I'm sorry, you'll be sitting on the side of the road bleeding. No one will answer the phone. Summer school teachers, all those kids that were not in school for the past year, there is summer school going on right now. July 1st, nope, they're not going to get paid. Those teachers, your kids, go home. No one's going to be paid. Why? Because we want a bigger dividend. So $325 million approximately pays for a $500 check. So $1,000 dividends, about $650 million, and so forth. So I ask you this, what is the better investment? $325 million in helping people take a $500 check to pay for rent, to pay for utilities, to pay for school clothes, their debt, maybe the college, maybe on travel, putting it in savings, whatever it may be. Some folks really need this money, absolutely. But we have programs to pay for those. We have rent assistance. We have $200 million for Alaska housing assistance. We have a very robust Medicaid budget. We have scholarship assistance for people. Would $325 million be better spent on year-round jobs, on bridges, on roads, on connecting communities with roads, on more mining, more resource extraction? That's what we do. That's our state. Or do we just want to rely on the state government, the federal government forever? Mr. President, it's the dividend again and again. We are crippling our state and we are not moving forward. This budget has a $500 dividend or a $1,000 dividend. Not to mention all the other federal money that people have received this year. $1,400 in the CARES Act. Another $600 in the Alaska Recovery or American Recovery Act. There's been a lot of cash going out to people this year. This is the year that we should focus on reinvigorating our economy through year-round jobs that provide competitive wages that support families well into the future. But no, here we are. Here I am. Here we all are, away from our families, debating a dividend. The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me. I just don't fathom it. My father is at home dying of cancer, and I am here listening to the biggest crock of crap I've ever heard. I'm so sick of it. Get a grip, people. Vote for this budget, or no state trooper, no one will answer the phone. Thank you. Fathom it. My father is at home dying of cancer, and I am here listening to the biggest crock of crap I've ever heard. I just don't. Creating our economy through year-round jobs that provide competitive wages that support families well into the future. But no, here we are. Here I am, here we all are, away from our families, debating a dividend. The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me. I just don't fathom it. My father is at home dying of cancer, and I am here listening to the biggest crock of crap I've ever heard. I'm so sick of it. Get a grip, people. Vote for this budget, or no state trooper, no one will answer the phone. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator von Imhoff.
Wow, powerful words being said there. The greed! I just can't fathom it. This was Senator Natasha von Imhoff discussing the PFD during the budget debate in the Senate last year, and she calls us greedy and entitled. This $100,000 a month trust fund baby who is now the head of the Rasmuson Foundation, which gets hundreds of millions of dollars every single year given to them from our state, local, and federal government every single year. Her foundation just came out with what their net worth was, which is over $900 billion. That's 900 billion with a big giant B on the end of it. And she calls us the greedy ones. Oh man, we are just so entitled that we just can't fathom it. And this was them squawking because the CBR vote had failed to pass in the House, which is where we are right now. And that was the great debate last year. Did we lose any jobs? Did anybody get fired? We didn't even have pink slips go out. And yet this is the type of what we get to hear from them. We had almost a similar speech given by Rep. Ivy Spanonshold earlier today, Poison Ivy. She's been in charge of the House Ways and Means Committee. This is where they start all of the most corrupt bills we currently have being pushed through down there in Juneau. Good example is HB 259, a 50-50 split of the PFD. 50% goes directly to K through 12 and early learning, and the other 50% goes to government, and then whatever is left over of the government's 50%, they will issue us a PFD from that. That is that bill. If that bill was to have passed or have made it out of the House Ways and Means Committee and into the next committee, which it hasn't moved since, if that was to actually make it out of there, that would be an instant $600 million increase to K through 12 education. Now let's put K through 12 here onto the table just for a minute, because I know it's going to come up later during these budget debates. For what they're getting, they're trying to early fund them again for the next year. Not the year that they're about ready to be funding right now, but the year after that. So forward funding, binding legislators currently, just like they have tried to do year after year, which has already been proven in the courts multiple times unconstitutional, and they can't do it. But they continue to keep trying to push it through, because if they get it to happen just once just once, they can continue to do it. Just like Governor Walker when he vetoed our very first PFD, and then that failed lawsuit brought to the courts by Wielkowski, where the Supreme Court determined that the word may now means shall, and shall now means may, and so anytime the word shall pay something now means may pay something, because legislators control the purse strings and they may or may not pay us a PFD, which brings us to where we are right now. They may or may not pay us a PFD. They say that the $1,200 they currently want to give us is out of the kindness of their hearts, that money doesn't really belong to us Alaskans. That's their money. It always was their money, that the permanent fund dividend and the statutory PFD laws that we followed for 4 decades before they corrupted them under Walker, those precedents of how long they had been paying the statutory PFD just doesn't matter. So currently we've got education K through 12. Their current budget was $1.33 billion this last year. That's $1,330 million this last past year. And this doesn't include the I believe it's somewhere a little over $1.7 billion of coronavirus money that they had been divvied up between all of the school districts in the state of Alaska over the last past year. Now, mind you, they didn't get to see very much of that to be able to spend within the school district themselves. It was all PPE and getting themselves set up for the coronavirus. But there was roughly about $700 million that still got just divided between the school districts out there unevenly, of course, and disproportionately. And we found ourselves with districts that were saying, oh, well, we don't know where to spend the money, so we're just going to create things as long as it falls under it. And then came out the infrastructure bill that was passed through Congress down there. And when that infrastructure bill came out, lo and behold, another billion plus was given to our school districts out there. $500 million of that went to Anchorage School District. $500 million that they get to spend until 2024. And that they are complaining that they're $50 million short from their budget, or $60 million short of covering their budget next year, not this year, next year. But they don't want to account in that $500 million for their infrastructure. In fact, they want to pass another $100 million bond for the school districts this year, another $100 million. If you think your property taxes are bad now, just wait. Speaking of property taxes, did you know today is the very last day to be able to vote down there in Anchorage? If you are in the Anchorage municipality, Eagle River, any of the outlining areas, Girdwood, all that are encompassed within the municipality there, this is your last day to vote. There's only 3 places you're able to vote in person, which is like the Lusac Library, the Ship Creek office down there for the actual voting, and then you have I believe it's the community center in Eagle River. If you have not mailed out your ballot, this is your last chance to vote. You have until 8 p.m. tonight. Lots of conservative assembly members and school board members that are running this year. You guys, if you get out and vote and take over the vote, you can change the demographics of the assembly and the school districts in Anchorage this year. A huge, huge change, and hopefully be able to stop that CRT that they're instituting in the school, equity and diversity. You see it all over the place, and it's everywhere, and they lie to you when they say they're not teaching CRT. It is CRT. That's why when they passed the equity and diversity bill that they had done last year while they were locked down and doing Zoom-only school board meetings, well, it looks like they're back in now.
Will the House please come to order? Madam Clerk.
Amendment number 23 by Representative McCabe, beginning page 77, following line 27.
Didn't we already do that? We're doing amendment number 1.
Amendment number 1 to amendment number 23 by Representative Carpenter, beginning page 1, line 4 of the amendment.
Representative Carpenter.
Madam Speaker, we don't have everybody. Do you want me to place a call in the House?
That No. Let's take a brief at ease.
So back to K through 12 there, we've got them saying outright that they did not plan on any of the K through 12 money actually increasing. Well, what the House has done is they put in what they classify as a bonus bill. It's a one-time funding of an additional $50 million this year. So their $1.33 billion budget that I was just describing has hundreds of millions of dollars extra still sitting there from both the coronavirus and the infrastructure project that had been given to them to spend. That money is still floating around, yet they claim that they're broke. Now the House wants to give them an additional $50 million for this next school year's budget. And then if that doesn't pass, or if that does pass, they also have another bill that they're hoping will pass that changes the student base allocation, or the base student allocation, and how much money is paid out per student. If that passes, this bonus bill of the $50–60 million they're talking about here gets passed, that will be stripped back out, and they will just continue on with the new student base allocation instead. But that has to pass through the Senate before they'll strip out that $60 million bonus. So that's what they claim anyways, and I don't see that happening. I see if they get that $60 million bonus passed through both the House and the Senate, that they will also take the student base allocation and make sure that passes also in the House and the Senate. And or at least they'll try to get it through the Senate. I don't think the Senate would pass it. It would stall out there and be dead on arrival. If they were to follow the current formula, they should be seeing a 10% reduction. They are saying that if you look at like Save Our States page and what they're posting out there, they're saying that they have not seen a student base allocation increase since 2017, and yet we see 7–8% inflation this year. Well, we also saw a 10% of reduction in just this last year of students, not to mention the other 5 to 10% over the last 10 years that they've never reduced for.
Madam Speaker, I move Amendment 1 to Amendment 23.
There's been an objection. Representative Carpenter.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So Amendment 1 to Amendment 23 removes the reference or the source of the funding from the amendment of general funds and changes it to earnings reserve account for both of the sums of money that are being appropriated here, the $203,000 in Section A and the $190,000. Sorry, let me correct that. Those are two commas. That's $203 million and $190 million. Both of them, this amendment would pull that money from the general fund as opposed to, I'm sorry, from the earnings reserve account instead of the general fund. Save the rest of my comments for the end.
Okay. Is there further discussion on Amendment Number 1 to Amendment Number 23? Representative McCabe.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I recognize that this is a operational versus capital. I don't really care where the funding comes from. Earning reserve actually fits a little bit better because I see this as an investment. It fits in the title of the of 281, and I just want to say that I fully support this amendment, and I hope we can consider this whole thing as an investment in our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further? Representative Rasmuson.
Madam Speaker, just very briefly, the money that's in the earnings reserve right now is earning a much higher rate of return, hopefully through the end of the year, than the general fund. So I would ask members to oppose this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Representative Carpenter in wrap-up.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Asked for a little bit of leniency on the 2-minute time limit since I didn't use my 3 minutes at the beginning.
Representative Carpenter, it doesn't work that way.
Well,
I'm sorry.
So this amendment is what is the purpose of the permanent fund? If it's just to pay for state government, then we ought to be having a conversation about what the earnings could be used for that would benefit all Alaskans instead of just those that rely on state services. The amendment before us, the underlying amendment, is a capital project that would help finish the railway north that would benefit all Alaskans through reduced prices in commodities and new jobs. If our permanent fund earnings are only there to pay for state government, and I think that's the direction, kind of the tea leaves here. If we're going to go from a 50-50 split to a 25 split, it's not going to be too long before we're making an argument like they did before we had the PFD, that we don't need a dividend. The larger and better use of permanent fund earnings is to pay for state government. If that's the direction that we're headed, then the permanent fund earnings that are in the earnings account, right? This isn't any money that's in the corpus. It's earnings from the account that have been retained, whether they're realized or unrealized. It's all appropriatable. It's all earnings. It's all permanent fund dividends that weren't paid in the past. And if that's just that, some of that money is just there to fund state government, then that only is for a portion of our population. Growing our state economy, changing the conversation from $2,400 PFDs to $2,400 paychecks is what we ought to be having a conversation about the purpose of our permanent fund earnings. And if you take what would be $300 million, $393 million, so $400 million from the earnings reserve account that's over $10 billion, and move it into the private sector in the form of a capital spending that improves the private sector economy, then that is a use of the earnings of the permanent fund that is comparable to spending on state spending. So let's have a conversation about what the best use of permanent fund earnings is. It cannot be just to prop up state spending.
Thank you. Are you ready for the question? Question is, shall amendment number 1 to amendment 23 pass the House? Members may proceed to vote. Will clerk please lock the roll? Does any member wish to change his or her vote? Will clerk please announce the vote?
14 yeas, 26 nays.
With 14 yeas and 26 nays, amendment number 1 to amendment number 23 has failed to pass the House. We are at amendment 23. Is there any further debate on amendment 23? Representative Merrick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I don't think anyone on this floor will be surprised to say that, or to hear that I support infrastructure projects in this state. I think this, projects like this that can bring economic development and stability to our state are very important. And I would like to thank the member who made the amendment. He came to me and explained it to me beforehand. I appreciate that as the capital budget co-chair. However, I told him then, and I will say again, I cannot support this group of amendments. This is an operating budget, and capital budget, although it is in the title, are really not appropriate here. We need to look at the capital budget comprehensively, and we need to weigh this project against other projects that members have brought forward. And we should also consider that this is a fairly large ask. And unless we can vet this through the committee process, I don't think we are doing our due diligence. There is another mega project out there, the Port of Alaska, and they're asking for a large sum of money, and we are vetting it through House Finance. And we're trying to, weigh the merits of that project as well. So I just, again, cannot support these amendments, and I appreciate, the opportunity to speak on that. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Crunk.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I support this amendment. Yesterday, when I was sitting outside looking at the building and realizing over the years how much money has been spent here, yet have we really built our infrastructure in this state? And I truly feel we failed epically at that. And this is a way forward to start building that infrastructure that's going to benefit Alaska 50 years from now, 100 years from now. So thank you.
Thank you. Representative Wool.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We got on our desks a packet from the amendment sponsor for Amendment 23, from Big Lake, and I flipped through it and I saw my name in it. I was kind of taken aback because I wasn't aware I was supporting the amendment, and in fact I'm not. But my name was in here because we wrote a letter, the members of the Interior Delegation, basically in support. And if I may read just very briefly, one sentence. It says, "We're writing in support of the Fairbanks North Star Borough, Matsu Borough Interior Gas Utility Build Back Better Regional Challenge Phase 1 grant proposal." So this is a grant proposal for federal money, the Build Back Better program, that would go towards this project, which I have no problem with. But just going willy-nilly in the general fund and pulling out close to $400 million for this project is not the way forward. And as the member from Eagle River mentioned, this is capital budget, which should be dealt with separately in a coordinated event. And so I do support, in general, these types of projects with railway and gas and interior gas utility. The letter that I signed was for a grant proposal, and I just want to make that clear. And I do not support spending close to $500 million or $400 million on this particular capital project.
Thank you. Representative Hopkins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to talk in support of infrastructure development in Alaska, but planned and needed at this time infrastructure development in Alaska. We did have this discussion in the Transportation Committee about the importance of and the possibility of different funding mechanisms for the Point McKenzie expansion. And we did hear from the railroad at that time as well. And they said they're not ready for this, and they don't, because they don't have a fiscal, the ability to have a fiscal plan to pay for this project and make it work. That was for bonding authority. This is for general fund dollars, which now puts our states at risk because we shouldn't just build projects, as the district or the member from District 5 said, willy-nilly. We need to make sure we have a plan and we put it out there in the long term and the short term. The interior gas utility does need to eventually, hopefully, see the expansion of the Titan facility, but we're not ready for that yet. We have to build out our infrastructure and make sure we have the demand. Additionally, we have a piece of legislation pending to give them the bonding authority that they need to make sure that those costs are sustainable for the state and for the members in Fairbanks. And that's something that I hope we can move through and support as well. So we need infrastructure development, but we shouldn't build it just because we can. We need to build it because we should. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Kaufman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. With respect to the amendment and some of the prior comments, I don't believe we need to build back better. We just need to build, and we haven't. And I get it. My only issue and the only reason why I won't be supporting it is because I believe that this does need to be in the capital budget. I think it's a better structure to have capital projects in the capital budget and the operating budget containing operating budget line items. So I won't be supporting it for that reason, but I do believe that we need to look at every infrastructure project that will bring value, that can be executed well, particularly those that will enable further resource development and opening up our opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Kurka.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I identify with the last speaker, but I also want to greatly sympathize with the maker of the amendment. And the need for infrastructure, and I think this is a valuable project, and if I lived right next to an unfinished state project, I'm sure it would irk me every day too, because of how wasteful that is. But, Madam Speaker, I can't vote to support any new infrastructure projects in this bill, and I guess I'll speak to it now and save my piece the rest of the time. I can't vote for any new infrastructure projects, as badly as they might be needed, while we're denying Alaskans the rightful full statutory PFD.
Thank you. In wrap-up, Representative McCabe. Oh, Representative Eastman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. There's a lot that could be said on this particular amendment. As we look across the state, we have different proposals for how to spend capital budget dollars. And I see that our House Finance Committee has included capital budget types of items in this bill before us. It's certainly in the title. I would expect if the committee was trying to keep those separate, then that wouldn't have happened. But here it is, and it's before us. And as I look to my constituents, I'm not a member of the Finance Committee. No one from my district is, of course. In fact, no one from the Mat-Su has an equitable stake on that committee because we only have one member. We're outnumbered 3-1 by Fairbanks. We're outnumbered 3-1 by Anchorage. If you're a member of the Republican minority, you're outnumbered almost 2-1 on that committee. We have 4 members out of 11 on the committee.
Point of order.
Representative Wool.
I don't believe they make up the finance committee.
Representative Wool, can you speak to?
No, I can't.
Okay. Continue,
Just to
Representative East.
make sure that people understand what this is in response to. This is a response to the co-chair expressing her
Representative
opinion.
Eastman, I'm going to ask you to confine your comments to the bill itself, or to
Yes,
the
I'm
amendment
correct,
itself,
responding
not to the co-chair or the chair or the finance committee, but to the actual amendment.
Madam Speaker, you permitted the finance chair to make her comments. I'm responding to those comments in the same spirit in which they were made.
Representative Eastman, you've heard my warning to you.
If the committee wants to vet these projects, the committee wants to keep the capital budget items in the capital budget, that is their prerogative, and they can do so. But I certainly don't hold it against the member from Big Lake, whether I support this amendment or not, for bringing it before the body, because he, like I, am not a member of that committee and really doesn't have a fair chance of being heard by that committee. And so I look at this amendment, nearly $400 million, from where I sit. That amendment compares favorably with proposals I've heard for the port in Anchorage. I would likely support this amendment over that. But again, we don't have that proposal before us. If it was a proposal for an efficient gas pipeline, I think that might compare more favorably than this. But again, I don't have that before me.
Thank you. Representative McCabe, now in wrap-up. Oh, Representative Carpenter, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just wanted to speak briefly to this amendment and the need for it to be here today. I totally get that we're having a capital conversation and an operating budget. I do believe that there is value in having a conversation about capital spending versus operational spending. They're all dollars, they all come from similar, or all from the same places, and we have to decide whether they go to the operating budget or the capital budget. So we need to have that conversation. However, and this is our first opportunity that I can think of in the last several years that we've been able to have a capital budget conversation, because we expected a capital budget to come through and it didn't for one reason or another. We have no guarantee that we'll even see a capital budget this year with the shenanigans that get played through the process outside of our control. So yes, we're having a conversation about capital budget on $400 million during an operating budget, and at this point in time, it's the only place in time that we have been able to have a conversation about it, and that is why, more than anything, this amendment is before us now.
Thank you. Representative Rasmussen.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. I did want to highlight that this is a capital request, as many have said. The current capital request in the budget, similar to this type of project that we're speaking about on the amendment, is a $2 million request for the Department of Health and Social Services. So I think to compare the current amendment to what is in the budget as a similar capital expenditure is a bit of a stretch. I think that it is really important to have a conversation about the various infrastructure projects across the state, because this appears on the surface to be a great project, but I haven't heard from any experts. There's been no committee process whatsoever that I've been a part of, and I sit on the House Finance Committee. And while I do represent an Anchorage district, I'm not opposed to projects in the Mat-Su or other regions of the state if it brings benefit to the state collectively. I think, the Port of Alaska serves 90% of the state. Does this amendment serve 90% of the state? I don't know. We haven't had committee process on it. So I would ask the maker to continue the conversation with us, because this is something that I'm very interested in learning more about, but I don't feel that this is the appropriate place for this amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Representative McCarty.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have a question to the maker of the amendment. And this process here, this is operation budget request, which my maybe limited understanding is that at the end of the year, if the money is not used, that it's swept back in. So is the intent for all this that the project's going to be completed in 1 year?
Representative Tar.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Like other members, I'm interested in having this conversation because of the importance of both of the projects listed here. But for example, why I hope we can do it when we do address the capital budget is we know we have a $2 billion backlog of deferred maintenance. And I guess I'm a bit hesitant to start building new infrastructure when we're having such trouble taking care of the infrastructure we have now. So if these funds meant that we wouldn't have investments in addressing the deferred maintenance, then I think that would cause me pause. So for today, I'm going to be a no vote on this.
Thank you. Double checking here. Representative McCabe in wrap up.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The 3 minutes should be on this end because it's going to take a while to answer the questions. Trains operate, right? Operating budget, who knew? So first off, this project has been vetted already significantly. I went back and looked at the committee hearings. We already have invested $157 million in this project. 3 years ago, it would only take $125 million to finish it, at least the rail spur to Houston. The others would have taken more. The first, to answer the representative from Fairbanks, the first Build Back Better grant was denied. They are applying for a mega grant. There is language in the back end of the bill that will repay the general fund if the grant goes through, the mega grant. And I have some information on how they're supposed to be doing that. We talked about building new infrastructure. This is not building. This is finishing what we started. So, for instance, the interior gas, the bonding for the interior gas plant can't do anything without this rail spur. So it's pointless to build a gas plant and build up a gas plant and add to it and add a bond if you don't have the rail spur to move the gas back and forth. So if this past year hasn't taught us anything at all, it's that we must work towards sustainability and resiliency. Everybody's worried about earthquakes. Everybody's worried about food sustainability. Everybody's worried about the Port of Alaska. We're going to rename it the Danyang Port of Alaska. We're worried about putting money into there. We're not worried about the 3 bridges across the Knik River. So if we do have some sort of earthquake and some sort of issue, there is no port on the other side of the Knik River. There's nothing. Everybody else gets food sustainability through Whittier, Seward, Homer, or Anchorage if we can get it. We don't. Matsu's 105,000 people, Fairbanks 95,000, a couple thousand in between. We need food resiliency. We need another port. So I can talk about the rest of it as we go through the rest of these amendments. So I urge a yes vote on this, and then you won't have to listen to me anymore.
Thank you. Are you ready for the question? The question is, shall amendment number 23 to committee substitute for House Bill 281 pass the House? Members may proceed to vote. Will clerk please lock the roll? Does any member wish to change his or her vote? Will the clerk please announce the vote?
10 yeas, 30 nays.
With 10 yeas and 30 nays, amendment number 23 has failed to pass the House. I am now going to roll committee substitute for House Bill 281 to tomorrow's calendar, holding it in second for amendments. Madam Clerk, please read the next item on today's calendar.
Committee substitute for House Bill 281, Finance, Appropriations, Operating Budget, Loans, and Funds. The bill is in second reading.
We're on 282.
Sorry. It's 282. I apologize. Committee substitute for House Bill 282, Finance, is in second reading.
I am going to roll committee substitute for House Bill 282 to tomorrow's calendar, and I am going to hold it in second for purposes of amendments. Madam Clerk, please read the next item on today's calendar.
There are citations on today's calendar.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move and ask unanimous consent that the following citations be adopted. The citations honoring Diane Miller. Citation honoring in memoriam Virginia Rose Woods. In memoriam Susan Sue Marie Larkins Hall. In memoriam Terrence P.A. McLean. And finally, in memoriam Leroy Evans.
There's been an objection. Would you like to speak to your objection, Representative Eastman?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to specifically address the memoriam for Sue Hall from Fairbanks area. I know she was an individual I had the pleasure of working with, along with her family, for a short period of time back when I worked for the state, and before that when I was in local politics. And I remember a time when I was told, and believe very much it to be true, that she was, anywhere in Alaska, the resident expert on anything. If you wanted to learn about parliamentary procedure, if you wanted to learn about how that works, she was the best person to speak with and a resource to all of us. So with that, I just wanted to make that comment. I will maintain my objection.
Brief at ease.
Wow, what a day. Okay, my studio is slowly getting set up more and more and more. Sorry for the bright lights in the back. Normally I would have a flag over the window at this point in time of day so that you can't see, but I've had to remove it so that I could get better access to doing the remodeling here. The budget debate is going to be continued on tomorrow, and they have shut everything down for today. The poor souls are just getting too tired to be able to continue discussing the budget that's already 9 days behind when they originally should have started it. But 9 days ago they decided not to do it because half of the, or a quarter of the illegal binding caucus coalition that was not there, that would have secured any amendment never getting passed like we're seeing today, wasn't there. So Louise Stutes put it upon herself to declare that because they didn't have enough people to... Nothing like finding out you're sitting here talking to yourself once again. I really do apologize for that. I really got to get a little better at clicking these buttons. I can't wait to be able to get my player down below that is literally a push button design to transfer between scene to scene to get fully up and functional. I had it at one point and then the complete laptop crashed. All my hard work that I had been spending almost 3 months building this platform, and then it all got erased and I had to restart from scratch, and only recently have I gotten it built back up enough to be able to start doing what I'm doing now, which is getting back into reporting on politics full time. We've been listening to the Alaska House talking today about the Alaska state budget and the mental health budget, which didn't get discussed today but is on the future agenda. And the Alaska House has listened to 23 amendments so far already today. About 4 of those were completely thrown out and never even got heard. Lots of them have been for paying the permanent fund dividend, either past dividends, all of the past dividends, a portion of the past dividends, 1 year of the past dividends, a full statutory PFD, a statutory PFD using general funds, a statutory PFD using ER funds, statutory PFD following the Permanent Fund Law, Statutory PFD, or a PFD that was a governor's 50-50 split. Every single one of them got all voted down along binding caucus lines. And that's pretty much the way they wanted to keep it throughout this entire thing. And so we've got them right now currently talking down there in Juneau.
But they do require you to be vaccinated, or you can listen to it on radio.
And so that I'm going to go ahead and mute out the Alaska legislators there so I don't have to listen to their dribble in the background. They're just doing salutations and promoting themselves or promoting the organizations they want you to go listen to. Like Sarah Hanna right now saying, if you're not vaccinated, you can participate by Zoom because only vaccinated people will be allowed to the event that I'm discussing right now. So it must be something happening in Juneau because Juneau has got some of the strictest COVID laws, mandates, excuse me, not laws, mandates in Alaska right now that disrupts our current situation. So again, we listened to all these different bills that were presented today. Only a couple of them may have been a little bit different, like the last one for the Amendment number 23, that was to provide general funds money to help along the capital project for expansion of the railroad into the Point McKenzie area, and so that we can actually make that a viable port, so that we just don't have to report on be holding to a port, the Port of Anchorage, or now the Port of Alaska, that be holding to them to be able to pay for the budget, or excuse me, to have to be dredged every single year. They have to dredge that port out. Point McKenzie's port does not need to be dredged out to be able to keep docking the deep water port ships that are unloading all the cargo. And a good majority of all that stuff is already being shipped into the interior anyways and has to go through the road system or through the railroad through Anchorage. And if they were to do the expansion into Point McKenzie like they had planned, that would eliminate a huge chunk of travel that would be involved. It would shorten the trips, and it would make it economically a lot more feasible and cheaper for our state to do that. But as was rightly pointed out on that last bill, this is a capitals project, and that's where that money needs to come from. But I don't see them pulling the money out in the capital project either to be able to do that, to pay for it. All the discussions today is why big government should win and why us Alaskans, the little people, should lose, why they should be funding the special interests versus actually following the laws that they have out there. K through 12 education, which has yet to be discussed during the budget debates today. I expect to probably hear something on it tomorrow. But they should be seeing a $130 million budget decrease because they got a 10% less population base, or student-based population base, than what they had the previous year before. If they're following the law, the student-based allocation would be reduced by 10%. For some reason, they don't want to do that. They want to increase it. In fact, in this current budget, they have a $60 million increase onto that budget as we speak. Same with the University of Alaska. They want to give them, I think it's another $15 million more this year on their budget, reducing everything that had been cut and previously, and just starting to slowly adding it back in again. This has been our Juneau legislators' objective since the first day that the governor and the president of the University of Alaska signed that original agreement. And they don't like the fact that that agreement was signed because it bound their hands, that they couldn't increase their budget. They couldn't touch the university's budget. Well, now that agreement's over with. Now they want to start adding money back into their budget again. So there's a lot of increases. If you wonder where I get my $7 billion total from, I mean, they want to double the K through 12 education right now. And by doubling it, I mean they want to pay for this year and they want to pay for the next year's education inside of the budget. So that's doubling the the $50 million increase that they gave it. That would be $1.38 billion that they want to give them this year. That's $50 million more than last year, which was $1.33 billion. And they want to increase that funding so that they can continue to give it to them. On a side note, this battle is not over with. If you haven't called your legislators, it's time to get on the phone and call them and let them know what your 2 cents are about the budget. It is not too late to get your 2 cents in. Call them, send them an email, let them know. I know what I've watched today, a lot of discuss. Rep. Kaufman, Rep. Rasmuson, they showed their true colors today and with their votes, and they were 100% against anything that paid a PFD or any kind of a PFD outside of what had already been passed by the Finance Committee. So it just goes to show you where the will of the legislators in the House are. The 23 law-breaking legislators that have aligned themselves with the illegal binding caucus back in January this last year. Kelly Merrick and all the rest of them that had sold us out and gave the Democrats full control once again. The Senate did the same thing. The Senate, even though they say they don't have an illegal binding caucus going on there, they put the exact same people in charge of the Senate Finance, which was basically handing the death sentence to all of us out there that have fought so hard to get rid of the rhino Republicans that were out there and get them replaced. And when they just go and restack the Senate Finance, who controls the actual purse strings, just like the House Finance does, they control the actual purse strings. So what we're listening to here today was all crafted by the House Finance. It doesn't matter what any other committee does out there. It doesn't matter what any legislator that's not in that House Finance has had to say, or their wishes or their wants. If the House Finance or the Senate Finance, those in charge of those two committees, don't want to pass it, they just won't even bring it up on the floor, or they'll listen to it and they'll do a quick vote and along binding caucus lines for their committee. They will vote it down because it doesn't follow the objective of the left's agenda, the socialist agenda, to keep expanding government and keep shoving more Alaskans into poverty. Like, share this video. Facebook is doing a good job of suppressing everything. So is Twitter, so is YouTube. They're making sure videos like this don't get reach, don't get seen very far. Twitter is actually doing a little bit better than Facebook has been here recently, which is really surprising considering I got less than 100 followers on Twitter, but I'm getting more views and more action on my post on Twitter than I'm getting here, which is scary enough because all I share there is videos. And just like with YouTube, YouTube is doing well, other than they've got me in a shadow banned also. Has to do with a coronavirus video that I had shared on SB 156, Freedom of Choice bill that passed almost unanimously out of the Senate and has been sitting in the House ever since, where it went to die because the House doesn't want Alaskans to have freedom of choice. They want control over you, which is very evident by what you're hearing coming out of their mouths here today and what they have had to say. So please like, share this video. If you're not following me on YouTube, go to YouTube. If you're not following me on Politidic, go to Politidic. Like those, make sure you click the bell to get notified. Same here with on Facebook. You can also find us on Facebook on Politidic Unfiltered. I started up that page for nothing more than to, every time I go live, the live videos will also be on that page just to give 2 more outlets to be able to get seen and heard from on Facebook. Facebook does a good job of censoring everything that is out there. They will flag everything and anything they can for copyright issues. Just like today, I tried very hard to keep up with the at-eases because of that stupid music that they play in the middle of those at-eases have copyrights on them. And so they say, oh, this video's got to be shut down until you remove those copyrights. And so Facebook isn't so bad about Gavel. Gavel they've never really messed with. But YouTube, on the other hand, YouTube will give up warnings that I'm playing copyrighted music and they will shut the video down, and or they will not allow it to be viewed until otherwise, which is like they did with the coronavirus. They said it was misinformation even though I was live streaming testimonies being given to our Alaska legislators down there in Juneau, and that was Senator Laura Reinbold's bill for freedom of choice on for the Alaskans. Thank you all for being here today. Like, share, make sure to show this, to share this video far and wide. Watch it all the way through. I think the first half was more informative than the second half, the first video that I had. it gave a better understanding of what it looks like for our Alaska legislators and what they truly had to say. I mean, Poison Ivy Spinansel, she had her Natasha von Imhoff moment here today. Into the second part of this broadcast, I also shared that little speech of hers from last year. You entitled, greedy. Oh man, the greed, I just can't stand it. So anyways, thank you all for watching here today. Make sure again to like and share. And just to give an idea of here what's going on, you can see I've got the ceiling put in all the way around, and I'm down to doing trim work on the place and getting it set up, and then I'll be able to move a desk in here, or if someone's got a really cool something they would like to donate, I am looking for captain chairs for guests that will be coming in. I've got quite a few people that are going to be running for Congress that I'll be doing interviews with here this year. And as we get closer to the regular primary elections, I am sure there will be a lot of legislators that are going to want to do one-on-one interviews with me and get their voices out to a larger audience so that people like you are informed about their politics and their views on what's things going on here in Alaska. So thank you all for tuning in here today, and you guys all have yourself a great day.